Wow.
I was telling my son I was doing this, and I showed him your clip, and he's like, "Oh, that's so cool, Mum. What are you going to sing?" I went, "I'm actually not going to sing it." There's no singing. I said, "It's an interview." He's like, "Ah."
Do you want to say a bit about what you do?
Yeah. Like I said, I'm a partner at PwC. I've worked for the firm for 20 years. I'm based, I know, actually it's my anniversary if anyone's on LinkedIn, it came out yesterday.
Oh, cool.
So 20 years. I'm based in the north, so I'm based in Leeds.
I thought you sounded funny.
I sound correct.
Oh, sorry.
I sound correct. And my role up there, I do two things mainly, three things actually. I lead the internal audit practice in the north, which covers sort of Manchester, Leeds, Newcastle, so it's quite a big area. Yeah. And my second is I lead the health industry group cool. for the north. My third, actually, which is only from this year, as I also lead on our inclusion and diversity agenda, which is interesting and fun.
But what I'm desperate to learn about is what are the barriers that black women and men face and have faced in their careers, and in particular, especially for you, because you spent 20 years at PwC. So I live in the north. I live in Yorkshire, and the area I'm from is not overly populated with black people. So I always felt growing up and wanting to have a career and be successful that I wanted to be recognised in my own right, rather than the fact I was black or the fact I was female actually. So. And that was difficult because clearly I am. And so I always felt I had to try and work twice as hard. Now, whether that was reality or subconscious, it's difficult to prove. But I genuinely felt I had to really work harder to prove myself, that people didn't prejudge me just based on how I look. And that actually it was based on my ability and what I could achieve and my potential. I'd say it's one of the biggest challenges. I can always remember going to a recruitment consultant 21 years ago now, and asked was wanting to join a big accountancy professional firm, and really was a mature student anyway, but he was very careful with his words, but he kind of made the point that I wasn't the typical kind of entrant to a professional services firm. Oh my god.
Clearly that did make me feel a little bit quite a lot undervalued, but actually it made me want to prove a point. So despite feeling that at the time, it actually spurred me on, and it always does spur me on, that if people think I'm not capable or I can't achieve because I have preconceived ideas, it actually gives me an inner strength to prove them wrong.
And did you challenge him on that at all? How did that go?
Yeah. So I said, what do you mean? And he was like, well, you've not got the right academic background, because I didn't go to one of the top universities. I went to Sheffield Hallam University, but I went as a late student, so I was a postgraduate rather than an undergraduate. And my experience at the time, even though I'd done a lot of auditing and things, he'd not seen it as something that actually he thought the firm wouldn't recognise as valuable. But luckily the firm did. And like I say, he was very careful with his words and what he said, and based it on my kind of academic. But even then, that's very non-inclusive. Despite I'd spent 6 years already kind of doing my trade, I probably had more experience than an undergraduate.
And do you think he was using that as a way of saying, because you're not a white bloke, basically? That's how it felt at the time. That's how it felt at the time. But clearly, he could never have said that. And you said that you've always felt you've had to work twice as hard. Have you had any specific situations that have really reinforced that? I think again it's been, as you're going through promotion and progression, I'm quite outspoken. I stand up for what I believe in and what I value, and therefore I've had to be careful not to be too assertive about some of those things, because one of the things I'd never wanted to be labelled as this woman's just lobbying for black, because she's black, she's trying to prove a point. So I was always
I always felt as I had to work really hard to be very competent in what I do, so that was never used as kind of the reason why this girl's made it. And actually I look back in my own career, there's been times when I've purposely avoided getting involved in things, you know, because I didn't want to be labelled in that way. And again, that was kind of a lack of, probably, I was probably being too selfish if I'm honest, but at the same time it was just I wanted to be seen as being like everybody else, rather than just being, this, we've only promoted her as a tokenistic black female, because I think that can also be just as damaging as some of the sort of prejudice and barriers that we have to face anyway.
But in so many ways you were kind of editing yourself.
Yeah.
In order to not stand out as kind of like angry black woman kind of thing.
Correct.
Which is exhausting, isn't it?
It is. Although I'm not angry, I am a black woman. So yeah, and it's having to fit in into the cultural norms. Exhausted. And actually, one of the most challenging questions I was asked as I was sort of being prepped for Partner and going through was, what have you done about diversity and inclusion? And actually I was quite embarrassed in response to that, because and I did say, look, I've not purposely asserted myself on this agenda for all the reasons I've just explained to you. However, I said I did commit to myself when I was on that journey that if I made it, I would then definitely use that opportunity to make a difference and be seen as a positive role model, to support people with challenges and barriers and help and mentor them to kind of deal with some of the the realities of being black.
Would you do it differently now?
I think I would have I probably would have been more aware, I think, of some of the challenges that people, don't get me wrong, I've always been involved in mentoring people and supporting people in their career, but I've always looked at it through a lens of people being diverse, rather than around ethnicity and in particular. However, I have a son who is, he's black. He's mixed race actually. Well, and I asked him, I said, how do you see yourself, Harvey? He says, I'm black, Mum. So, and so actually seeing him grow and develop it's made me a lot more aware of the things that he has to deal with and the challenge. And so now I do feel I'm probably more equipped. Whereas going through it, you're kind of dealing with your own stuff. So I didn't feel like I had enough energy to help everybody else. I was kind of dealing with my own kind of challenges and my own way of kind of getting to where I wanted to be.
In terms of you talked about kind of like editing yourself and feeling like you had to work twice as hard, and then only really being able to kind of embrace, I guess, being a role model when you got into the partner process. Knowing all what you know now, would you, not necessarily in terms of being a mentor or anything, but in terms of the pressure you put on yourself, would you do that differently, or do you think things have changed such that you wouldn't have to have that internal pressure on yourself?
I think 20 years ago, like I say, it was very different joining the firm. I can't remember for the first several years seeing another kind of black face. So absolutely, I think we are more open to these kind of conversations. We are more open to diversity and inclusion in its broadest sense. But that back then, I just felt the world wasn't that aware as they are today, and I always felt, like I said, it was just that getting that balance right. So I didn't really want to risk it. But look, now I do think people coming into our firm, there's and I've learned this from doing the diversity and inclusion lead role. There are a lot more support networks, a bit more understanding, things like the work that you've done around raising the profile and making people more conscious of some of the issues. It's not perfect, but totally. I think it's easier for people to have more open conversations about it, than it was definitely 20 years ago.
Yeah.
The only person I ever spoke to about this to was my really close friends, even my mum actually, and I can always remember her. You know, my mum was came over to England in the 1960s as a nurse, and I can always remember saying to my mum, "Oh, I'm going to go, you know, for this job at PwC, it was Pricewaterhouse at the time, and you know, I'm going to work in the city." And she was like, "Oh, you know," she was a little bit fearful because she was like, "Oh, you know, make sure that you feel accepted, you feel included," because clearly, you know, when she came and started working, it was even worse than what it was, you know, sort of, you know, 20 odd years on. So I think it's always been there, but we've definitely got better. But there's still work to be done. I love the theory around privileged, and which is a really different way of looking at it. And I think people should get that. You know, if you're born with, you know, in a society where you're white, you know, in a society where you're middle class and you've had privilege and a great upbringing, actually, I'd say even probably more than 20%, probably 60% of the work's pretty much done. You know, you've had advantages, and so I think the reason why some people don't get it is because they genuinely in their own mind don't think that these barriers exist, because how would they know? They've never had to experience it. And I always think, okay, let's pick you up and put you in Africa, you know, in an African village, and see how that's how it would feel. So I think that whole kind of idea about privileged, and actually if you don't know, because it's something that you've just been given as a gift, and so you will never have to experience some of those challenges that other people have, but you genuinely can't then sit. But the one thing I do struggle with is when they can't appreciate and understand that. You know, they don't have to completely get it, because why would they? They've never experienced it. But they should understand that. First thing is obviously physical appearance. You know, people will you know, whether we like it or not, it happens. I do it, everybody does it. They prejudge you based on your appearance and what they first see. So again, they wouldn't necessarily have the same kind of experience on first impact that you would do if you were black. So that's one of the first things is just visually that can have a negative impact on some people if they're just not used to seeing black people. And if you come from, you know, again, a very nice white middle class upbringing, and you're probably put into very, you know, social situations quite early on in life, where you're exposed to, you know, different experiences that probably bring you more confidence in those social settings. If you know, come from an ethnic minority background, I don't think you're exposed to that in all cases as early on. So again, I think although it's not necessarily intentional, it does create an advantage where I think, you know, you're more confident in certain situations than other people are. The other one is, I think, as well.
Was that true for you in terms of your upbringing? Yeah,
definitely. So, you know, my upbringing, I came from, I live in Doncaster, still live in Doncaster now. You know, networking, going out for, you know, my mother was very traditional. We generally ate at home. You know, the first time I had a takeaway, I think I was probably about 18. So, you know, my social network was quite small and quite insular, I guess. You know, not that I thought anything was wrong with it. I think the thing that saved me is I'm quite gobby, and I do like to talk. So I was always I've always been very sociable. So I felt less intimidated by being in social situations.
So being socially confident by default as a young kid for a lot of white kids is kind of a privilege, because it sets you, because you're more confident then in social situations, therefore you're going to network easier, you're going to make connections easier. You know, your dad can sort this out for you. You know, can get you that work experience, placement, can sort that for you. Notwithstanding now, I'm in a position. My son is very privileged, and I do remind him of that. But you know, when you're in that network and you understand how these things work, and you can be taught that at an earlier age, it gives you more confidence. without being a bad person, without being deliberately racist, without being anything, you know, if you are white, you do have privilege.
Yeah.
And it might be quite cool for people just to own that.
Yeah.
Because,
and accept it. It's
you
not.
know,
It's not. It's not a bad. It's not a bad
it's
thing.
like you didn't decide to be in that position. That just is because you don't have the resistance socially that you may experience, and often absolutely, you know, you do experience that you would if you weren't white.
Yeah.
And then you've got the expectation that you will achieve and you can achieve versus a potential non-expectation or a negative expectation.
And it, you know, it's interesting because I've, you know, I have obviously now I can look back and I speak to my mum, and you know, my mum was saying to me, you know, when they came to England initially, that was seen as a great opportunity anyway in itself, but it was just about getting a job, surviving. Do you know what I mean? So, you know, and it was
life,
just to creating a better life. You know, what did that look like? Was it about, you know, in the same ways that it would have been if you had been born at the same time and in a white family? You know, their needs and their requirements were very, very different. But like I said, it's not because it makes it wrong. And you know, I say this to my son, and luckily at the moment he does get it, and I'll say, Harvey, you are privileged, you know, you've got access to so many things. Don't ever take it for granted, but just respect that some people will not have the same privilege. It doesn't make you a bad person, it's just a fact. For me, I'm a better person because I am who I am, and I have stayed true to who I am.
That's what I always like whenever I'm doing like a thing with young people who are desperately wanting to be successful. I'm like, please God, just don't lose who you are. Because it's a tragedy.
It is
to lose who you are and give up. And yet so many young people really, they're like, where do I sign? You know, why do that guy's beeping so much? I'm using an indicator.
I know.
You know, it's a tragedy that they want to give up who they really are.
Yeah, I agree.
This one right here.
Yeah, it's absolutely perfect. Wow, that's brilliant.
What service?
That is amazing.
Door to door, almost.
So, do I need to say any final words, or have you got enough?
No, just thank you.
Thank you. No, I enjoyed that as well. It was great fun.